It was centuries after the creation of the abomination that the Primes were once more under detectable threat from the Nameless One. His assault had seemed to slow, or perhaps his attention was elsewhere, but no matter, for the Prime incursion did not begin with a run of subterfuge, a building of a power base, and then finally a trickle, followed by a raging torrent of demons. Oh no. This time it was straight to the open gateway to his demonic power, and a mass assault of pure demonic force. Why? Well, this was because this Prime had no protection. There were no priests that he could sense, and no resistance that was worth worrying about. In short, the massacre was quickly achieved, and none escaped, for none of them had the means to do so. Krilsis was allergic to this attack too late, and he saw the Prime fall in scant days, and there was indeed no way he could do anything to defend it, mainly as there was no divine presence upon that realm. Thalassiac was seen fleeing the Prime, however, so at least one of their agents had seen the start, and the fall. Thalassiac activated a tether to a communication spot of the hosts, and passed on what he had seen. The Nameless had appeared suddenly, in the midst of a celebration, and laid waste to several cities within hours. He then spread out at a great pace across the world, his demons literally covering every foot of the Prime surface. Thalassiac had never seen so many demons in a single place, and definitely not as many to achieve this sheer blanket of demonic power on such a scale. His power had most certainly grown beyond the scope of what they had bargained for. The Nameless himself, however, did not make an appearance, and let his hordes do the job. The Prime was not consumed either. Instead, it was tainted with demonic energies, an immense demonic horde left to inhabit it, and that was it. Nothing of the Prime was left untouched, and every living creature upon it was consumed. It was like it was some kind of feeding ground. Then a few weeks after the conquest, Thalassiac could no longer sense this Prime directly. He had to travel to a connecting plane in order to view it, and in doing so, discovered the reason why. The Nameless was creating new demons here, the Horrors, and they had been created in vast numbers, far beyond what had been seen prior. The demons that had taken the Prime were now merged into each other to form a ghastly melding, their individual power adding to every other that was coupled with them, creating a far more powerful demon. It was still a lesser, a minion, a foot troop, but its sheer power was far beyond those of a normal lesser daemon. He had gained this knowledge from somewhere, Thalassiac was sure. Whatever it was, it had shown him how to do this, and this meant that things could only get worse from now on, as defences against demonic entities may very well be overpowered by these amalgamations. He was about to head to a safe location and pass this information to Krilsis, when he felt a presence that overshadowed his own power by tenfold. What the, he thought, and found himself suddenly looking for a connection from this plane, as he felt the portals waver, the tethers sever. This was not a good sign. The plane he stood upon was that of a fire elemental, and he looked to the centre and quickly sped that way, using his knowledge to swiftly bypass the wave of power that washed over him. As he arrived where the Prime Elemental resided, he sputtered out the words, "You are under attack!" just as the wave hit him again, and the Prime fire buckled under the blow. Thalassiac began to weave wards of protection, and to channel the wave away, making a safe place behind the wedge he formed in the flow. "We need to leave this place now, lest you be lost to the Nameless." The Prime fire drew itself up, towering over him, and began drawing the power of his plane into him. He was breaking the seals and anchors, removing the connections, and tearing the magic from the advancing, pulsing waves of force. "They are here!" Thalassiac shouted out into the noise of the raging fires. "The Horrors!" As he sensed a portal open and then begin to pour through in vast numbers, rending the magic as they progressed, tearing up his own minions and fueling their own power, increasing their swath of destruction as they advanced. "We need to leave now!" he shouted, and began to open a forced portal to the nearest place he could manage, mustering the power reserves he had been holding on to pierce this strange fog of magic, and forcefully pierce through the barriers between the realms. His urgency painfully obvious as the Prime Fire stood there drawing as much of his plane in as he could, still stationary and growing. Now! He screamed as he ripped a hole in the plane and jumped through. But as the prime fire tried to follow, he could not. His magic could not pass. Why? Thalassiac's mind raced. How was this so? And then it dawned on him. The demonic magic could not follow him through the rift. The prime fire had been absorbing his plane in order to take it with him, to prevent the Nameless One from gaining control of it. But it was to no avail, as he was absorbing threads of demonic magic too. I know you can hear me, Lord of Fire. Thalassiac concentrated and pushed his thoughts through the prime of the plane he had fled from. You must leave your plane behind. You have been demon-tainted and cannot pass. He has you lest you drop your power and flee now. His urgency was felt, and the prime turned to him and rushed at the portal, trying to force his power through it. No! You must leave your power or he will take you! Thalassiac cried out, and the prime turned and saw the horrors flowing over each other, surging towards him and the portal. He turned and split his power, forming many great elementals who began to hurl fire in huge balls and jets at the oncoming mass of arms and faces, as his own power diminished rapidly till he was no longer of his plane. He expended all his power, his plane, to cover his escape, and he stepped through the rift. Thalassiac threw himself in front of the rift and untied the threads as fast as he could, removing his signature from the remaining magic, just in time as a horror leapt forward toward the open rift, only to be torn apart as the rift closed with it half inside, obliterating the threads of its form instantly. The prime of fire looked to Thalassiac, his power now stripped from him. His own plane, life, his very meaning was now taken from him with the loss of his plane. He knew nothing more than what he was, and now he had none of it. He stood there waiting for guidance, alone for the first time in his existence. Follow me, Thalassiac said to him wearily, and he wove a new portal for them, to a prime he knew was far from this place. They passed through and took rest inside Lassashar. He told the sage of what had just transpired, and that this fire prime needed a home until a new power could be found for him, or a dead plane he could take over. The sage welcomed him warmly, and they talked for hours about his identity and his role in the cosmos, and the sage quickly learned new truths about the planes and their workings. Thalassiac contacted the Pantheon of Dominia, as he was too weak from his efforts to contact Krelsis or the hosts, and they came to him with great speed. They spoke for days about the events and the problems of an elemental prime being removed. They had of course once been demonic in nature, and they understood the sheer power they would have if they had ever managed to do what had just taken place, and they all understood the repercussions of this. For one, it meant he would be able to wield the power of elemental fire, drawn from the elemental planes themselves, although he had not captured their origin, so perhaps his mastery would only be partial. They were unsure, as this was something that had never happened as far as they were aware, and so they could only guess. No matter, such a power gained was going to be felt soon enough, of that they were all sure. As Thalassiac sat drawing power slowly from the prime to replenish his reserves, the Pantheon began discussing their own plans. As Thalassiac listened, he understood what they were aiming to accomplish, but he had to inform them of their folly. It will not work, he stated. As you know, he has just taken an entire elemental plane, and scant days before, an entire prime. His power level is beyond yours even now as a combined force, and you would only end up feeding his hunger, and in turn your power would be used to attack the other hosts from here, where he could use your powers. They fell silent, their enthusiasm clearly overlooking the obvious. He could merely suck them dry as they fought, and turn that power upon them. The longer such a fight lasted, the more sure they were to lose. This was something they could not afford. I have an idea on how to fight him. In fact, to take the fight to him in some manner. He paused, making sure they were all listening before continuing. But in order for it to work, I would need your permission and your blessings. They looked to him, unsure of what he was talking about. Of course you would have our blessings in any such action, but what is it you would be asking of us? He paused again, and looked toward the sky before continuing. I would need your vessel.